Welcome into the Email Online podcast. Mason Voth, Alec Bussey here with you from Email Online, a part of Rivals, where you can go get everything checked out about the Cats. We have a lot going on with, obviously, basketball that is still in the middle of a really, really good stretch. They have now won 3 consecutive games. First time that they've done that in a long, long time. You have to go back to the opening stretch of Big 12 play. So they're in good shape there. Just 2 games left in the regular season for K-State. The senior night game on Wednesday against Oklahoma, and then the final road trip of the year to Morgantown on Saturday to take on West Virginia. And the Wildcats still have quite a bit to play for here. Number one, they're trying to guarantee their best possible seed in the Big 12 tournament. And if K-State is able to get at least one win this week and get a Baylor loss, they will secure the number 3 spot. If K-State just goes 2-0 this week, that takes care of things as well. They will be the number 3 seed, which means they will play the last game of the day. The one thing we know for a certainty now is that K-State in Kansas City is either going to play the very first game at 11:30 or the very last game at 8:30. The way things look, it would likely be K-State and KU would be the 2 main draws if K-State ended up in that morning session. That would make it a tough ticket, and then also be a semifinal matchup for K-State and Kansas if everything worked out. So I think all things considered, it would be best for K-State to get that 3-6 matchup, even though we don't know who that's going to be yet. There's a lot of different scenarios that can play out with how the seeding will be determined. Iowa State, TCU, and Oklahoma State are all going to be trying to figure out how that works this week to make sure that they don't slip down into the 7 spot in the play-in game. But a bunch of random stuff that doesn't really matter right now. We'll have to break it down when it all ultimately goes down. Big 12 has some good games tonight. Baylor on the road in Stillwater to take on Oklahoma State. The Cowboys feel like they need a signature win. Also, West Virginia is going to be at Iowa State this evening. The Mountaineers let a golden opportunity slip over the weekend in Lawrence. They desperately need another win to keep them in. As of this morning, Jerry Palm had both of those as the last 2 teams in the field. So we'll have to see how it ultimately works out for the bubble teams in the Big 12. But K-State certainly isn't one of those, and they took care of business against Oklahoma State, a solid team. Any road game in the Big 12 is going to be difficult, and they finally proved that they can win a road game again in the Big 12. That was, to me, the most important part of the weekend, was that they were able to step up and get the job taken care of.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that Kansas State did on Saturday was find a way to come back in the second half. I think it's something that we have seen them kind of start to do a little bit here of late, is show an ability to come back in the second half of games. When you think back to the win over Baylor at Bramlage, and then obviously they were able to come back from, I think, an 8-point deficit on Saturday in the second half against Oklahoma State. So that's showing some toughness. That's showing some resilience to be able to come back from those situations. And I think it's starting to show that this team is maybe learning how to fight through some adversity where, earlier in the season, when you kind of look back at their previous schedule, they kind of laid down at TCU when they got blown out at Schollmeyer. They did kind of fight back a little bit at Iowa State, but it was kind of at the end when I felt like the game was kind of already over. You know what I mean? One of those situations. And then they never really made it a game at Kansas after Kansas had their big run in the end of the first half. And then obviously at Texas, once Texas punched them in the mouth in the second half, they kind of laid down again. So you're starting to see them show some toughness and some resilience, especially after the last 2 wins where they had to come back against at least one team that's going to be a top 3-4 seed in Baylor, and then potentially an Oklahoma State team that gets into the tournament as well. So seeing those kind of growth points this late in the season is definitely something that's inspiring, in my opinion, for K-State.
Yeah, and a couple of things for K-State. They were down 2 at halftime against Oklahoma State. They even had to make a little bit of a push there. The Desi Sills play where Tyke Green poked it away and Sills was able to go and finish was significant. But then Oklahoma State came out and they immediately got the first 2 buckets of the second half, and so they had pushed the lead back to 6. Then K-State goes on a little burst where they actually take the lead early in the second half. Marquise Noel hit a 3 to go up 40-39. Eventually, though, the Cowboys were able to extend the lead back up to 8 points. That ends up being the largest lead of the day for Oklahoma State. That was just over 12 minutes to play in the game. I think when O State made the bucket to go up 8, I told you that I thought it was probably going to be over, just because the K-State team that we had seen recently had not been able to handle situations like that on the road, where Oklahoma got on a roll, and it was the death blow. Texas Tech, just too much early on in the game that K-State couldn't overcome. The game in Allen, K-State made a little bit of a push to get back into it, but that second wave killed them. There just wasn't a whole lot to go off of to suggest that K-State was going to be able to withstand that. But then they come out, they get the lead cut down to 4. That's when Jerome Tang gets his technical foul with the official, and K-State's down 6. But from that point moving forward, the Wildcats were able to be pretty aggressive and really put a stop to what Oklahoma State had going on. I had the number. I need to go find it here. K-State outscored Oklahoma State 22-13 after the free throws were made on the technical foul. So K-State was able to overcome it, get the job done. And I was impressed by the way that K-State was able to kind of go through and fight in the game. And they showed just how successful they could be. So I don't know. We'll have to see how K-State looks this week. They got some good competition coming up. Oklahoma at home should be easier, but the road trip to West Virginia gives them another opportunity to kind of prove themselves and show that they're back on track. So to me, that's what this weekend was about. We knew K-State going to Oklahoma State, it wasn't going to change a lot for them. A loss here, they probably still would have been in the 3 seed range. Still could have maybe argued to get a 2 seed at some point. Now they just kind of keep chugging along there, and it's all about avoiding the home loss to Oklahoma. One thing I mentioned there was the Jerome Tang technical foul. There are some people did not agree with when it came or how it went down. I loved it from the get-go. I understood what Jerome Tang was doing there. He felt like that his team was not getting fair treatment on different sides of the floor. I think he would be right with that. Oklahoma State was they had 3 fouls. K-State had 9 when the technical foul took place, and it ultimately was one of those where it felt like a lot of little things were getting called when Oklahoma State had the ball, but not much was getting called when K-State had the ball, or there were some missed moments earlier in the game. I know that there was a video where I think Marquise Noel just gets shoved in the back when everybody's going up for a rebound and thrown to the floor. Didn't get called. A lot of stuff there. Jerome Tang had it, and he let the refs know, and in a nice way. He made sure that he gave a pretty stern clap in the direction of the official. He got teed up, and it was right after K-State had cut the lead to 4. I think in that moment, Jerome Tang realized that, hey, all right, this is the time to go get it. We've made it manageable. The team's got fight. We're playing like the better team right now. We can handle even if I give them 2 free points. And his team answered, and they were able to go get it done. So I'm good with it. I like seeing it from Jerome Tang. I like the way that he handled it. I thought it was very smart. I know a lot of people will disagree with that, say that, there's never really a good time for that, or especially when you're down. But I think he knew exactly what he was doing, and it worked. So we can obviously say that it worked out for him, but I wouldn't have had a criticism of it even if K-State had gone on to lose that game, because I think what he was doing was ideal and exactly what you need to do as a head coach in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I made my point, I think, on the Video Fest break known that I didn't think it was a very well-timed technical foul. And the reason it ends up being a well-timed technical foul, in my opinion, in hindsight, and again, like hindsight's 2020, and I'm generally not someone who changes my opinion on things in hindsight. Like I try and make my opinion on a situation that happens live, and then if I end up being proven wrong or the situation changes with more intelligence, then I guess I was wrong. So in hindsight, I guess I was wrong for not liking the technical foul. But the reason that it really became an okay foul to give, or an okay technical foul, I guess you could say, was because it happened at the 10:49 mark of the second half after Kansas State gets a layup to make it a 53-49 game. And obviously Oklahoma State goes to the line and makes the 2 free throws, with Caleb Asbury then able to make it a 55-49 game with 10:49 left in the second half. But they don't score. Oklahoma State doesn't score again until the 6:23 mark of the second half. So that's really why it ended up being an impactful and a positive direction for Kansas State technical foul. Again, I think that has something to do with the defense maybe stepping up and responding to the energy that Tang was giving them, but also keep in mind too that Oklahoma State didn't really have the greatest second half offensively, and it's of course a team that's challenged offensively. I said to you and other members of the K-State press group that they just don't have a sense of where to be very often on the court. Speaking of Oklahoma State on the offensive side, And I don't think very many times they're ready to shoot when they do catch the ball, whether it's on a kick out or whether it's on a player in the paint who gets it off of a drive. And I think that's one of the reasons why Oklahoma State struggles a lot offensively. They just don't necessarily have the greatest sense of where they are on the court. But for Kansas State to be able to kind of go, close to 4 minutes without an Oklahoma State bucket directly following the technical foul, I think is a big reason why K-State was able to kind of get things moving in the right direction. And that layup or the 3-pointer that John Michael Wright made after the 3 or 4 minute drought that Oklahoma State had actually gave the Cowboys the lead back at 60-59. But at that point, K-State has taken, all the momentum because Oklahoma State hadn't scored for a good stretch of time there. So the players responded to it well. I'm not the type of person who's going to change my opinion on if it was well timed or not. And maybe that's just me being stubborn and liking to be right. But yeah, the way the players responded was definitely in a positive way for Kansas State. And I think that is certainly inarguable.
Yeah, well, and the defense, we talked about how it worked out for them the last 2 games against Iowa State and Baylor. They struggled a little bit early on. They gave Oklahoma State some looks. The Cowboys were able to finish inside. But then in the closing stretch of the game, so after the technical foul takes place and everything, K-State held Oklahoma State to a scoring drought of almost 6 minutes, the one that you alluded to right after the tech. But then in the closing stretch of the game, Oklahoma State got a bucket from Caleb Boone with 3:50 to play in the game. So they put themselves in a spot where they were down by 2 at that point. K-State locks them down and doesn't give up another bucket until there's 9 seconds left in the game. So K-State was able to hold Oklahoma State in the last half of the second, basically, to a performance where they weren't going to get many shots to go down. It was impressive to see how they worked out. Yes, Oklahoma State's not a great offensive team, and I think to what you're talking about, like they just don't know where to be in the right spots. I think that happens when you don't have great offensive talent or talent that blends in to working towards like a good offense. When you have very few shooters and guys that have just low-level offensive ability, they're trying to cheat. They're trying to do different things to get a basket a little bit easier than some. And so the offense is going to look a little unorthodox. And sometimes I think it's going to be guys going off script. And that's what we saw from Oklahoma State. The important thing was just that K-State ended up making life a little bit tougher on some of the guys like inside. Like Caleb Boone got off to a really good start in the second half. He was a pretty big factor in what they did in the second until K-State was able to kind of lock down. They found ways to make it tougher inside. K-State rebounded a little bit better. They got a critical block from David Gasson in the game. So there was a lot to take away from it. And like another element that has to be talked about is the fact that Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson, that was a performance that was a lot more along the lines of what we saw from them earlier in the season. I know Noel still ends up with 7 turnovers. He still had more assists in the game, though. And he was more efficient shooting the basketball. And Keontae Johnson, that was great what he provided from them. He was a little bit more aggressive in the shots that he took. A lot of things that worked out in the game for those two guys. And I thought that they were really big in the way they played, and good to see them kind of getting back into that form down the stretch run here.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Noel played well, I guess you could say. I have a tough time really diagnosing the way Noel played. I think it was a pretty solid game overall. To be able to score 22 points and dish out 8 assists, I think is obviously a really good game, but you dived a little bit deeper into it, and he was still 5 of 12 from the field. So you'll take that. 3 of 8 from behind the 3-point line. Again, you'll take that given his previous shooting slump, but 7 turnovers is tough, but then he also had 4 steals. So you kind of cancel those out and you say, all right, well, maybe he only had three turnovers. But the good thing is about his 7 turnovers on Saturday was that all of them were dead ball except 1. So if you're going to turn it over 7 times, or if you're going to turn it over at all, the best way to turn it over is to make sure that it's a dead ball and it doesn't allow your opponent to be able to get fast break points or a ton of points off turnovers. And Oklahoma State, they did do well getting points off turnovers. They had only 4 fast break points, though. So that's kind of the biggest difference here. I mean, they had 19 points off of K-State's turnovers, but only 4 of them were fast break points. So you kind of have to decipher those a little bit. And I think a lot of times those points off turnovers numbers can be a little deceiving, and a better way to look at it sometimes is the fast break points. And I think K-State did a good job of transition defense and then also limiting some of their turnovers. And they had 16 of them in total on Saturday. They did a good job, I think, of limiting some of those to dead ball situations. I mean, I don't know how many of them were dead ball off the top of my head, but if you take away Noel's 6 dead ball turnovers, it's down to 10 turnovers overall in the game. So certainly not a number that you like in the turnover department for your starting point guard, and that continues to be a major issue for Marquise Noel. Even though he went 10-0 assist to turnover ratio against Baylor, that's certainly an outlier at this point. He's turning it over more than 3.5 times a game in Big 12 play. So it's one of those situations where if you're going to turn it over and you're going to have to live with that with Marquise Noel at this point, obviously make it a dead ball situation.
Yeah, and he was better in the last, that 12-minute stretch we talked about to finish the game out. He was better in that period too. His last turnover came at the 11:50 mark. He had one more at the end, so one more of the turnovers came at the end. Kind of a weird play. It was like 12 seconds left. The game was already over. So he played a clean closing stretch when K-State absolutely had to have it. The turnover thing is it's kind of odd the way it worked out. There was a stretch there where I think he was trying to do too much. A lot of them were resulting in those live ball turnovers. On Saturday, there were some turnovers that get charged to him that either a little fluky or I'm not sure, how much they should actually be on him, but he still committed them. We could say for him to be tighter with the basketball, but I really, if you're going to get 22 points from Marquise Noel, he's going to be 3 of 8 from 3, and do a lot of other things well for you in the game, like give out 8 assists and 5 rebounds and 4 steals. I can live with him turning the ball over 7 times because he's going to more than make up for it. It's just a matter of, kind of what you're saying, like make sure that if you are going to turn it over, limit the ones that are killers, which we saw in games at like TCU or the Oklahoma and Texas Tech game where they turned into an easy 2 points. At least give your defense a chance to try and make Oklahoma State work for the points off turnovers, and they certainly were able to do that. Everybody else on Saturday, Naquan Tomlin was decent when he was on the floor, but he was in foul trouble. He wasn't out there all that much, and then you got a couple of moments from Desi Sills and Cam Carter, and I think the best way to sum up Saturday is enough guys chipped in and did a few things at the right time. It wasn't like the Baylor game where it felt like from start to finish, everybody had a serious role, and they helped kind of create the lead and the victory for K-State. On Saturday, it was much more they needed Noel and Johnson to kind of keep them steady throughout the entire game. And then when it was time to kind of close things out, they got a critical bucket from Ish Massoud, from Cam Carter. Desi Sills was nice in taking it to the basket for him at various times. So certainly wasn't the same team performance that they had against Baylor, but they found a way to get it done. And I don't care how it looks when you win on the road in the Big 12. If you win on the road, it's good. And K-State was able to do that. And now you shift your sights and get ready for Oklahoma this week.
Yeah, it's important to obviously win on the road in the Big 12, and it's certainly something that we hadn't seen this Kansas State team do since early January. And obviously they beat 2 of the better teams on the road at that point in the season, beating Texas and beating Baylor. And, they posted a ridiculous amount of numbers in those games on the offensive side, but they obviously struggled on the road. And losses at TCU, they lost on the road. Obviously at Iowa State, 2 good teams, although Iowa State's really started to struggle. I think they've lost 8 of 12 since starting 4-0 in the Big 12. And I think that they're kind of regressing pretty hardly, and they're kind of running into the issue where their offense just isn't good enough at this point in the season. And no one's going to fault you for losing at Allen Fieldhouse and losing to Kansas, who is one of the 2-3 best teams in the country at this point. And I don't know if people are going to fault you too much for losing at Texas Tech or Oklahoma, considering they're both borderline quad 1 wins. But, those are certainly games that K-State probably feels like they should have won. And if you win one or both of those, I think you're sitting in a pretty good opportunity to push the Big 12 championship trophy this last week of the regular season. But again, living in hindsight there, K-State can't go back and get wins at Texas Tech or Oklahoma. So you got to move on to this week where you've got the Sooners back in Manhattan for senior night on Wednesday. And then I think you said it earlier about the Oklahoma State game. Nothing was really going to change for Kansas State if they lost to Oklahoma State on Saturday. I don't necessarily think anything would change if they lose to West Virginia on Saturday in Morgantown, but I do think it's a game that you could really feel good about yourself if you go in there and handle your business well, and potentially you knock West Virginia out of the tournament.
Yeah, I think the stage looks like this for K-State. I think at this point, as long as they take care of Oklahoma on Wednesday, I think they'll be a 3 seed at the worst in the tournament. I think if they win out this week or they have some really good showing in Kansas City, I think that they will be a 2 seed. I think that they would need a lot of crazy things to happen for them to get up to a 1. It's not totally out of the question. If you go and look at some of the numbers out there that like Team Rankings has out, they give K-State a 12.6% chance of being a 1 seed. To me, K-State's going to have to go 5-0 the rest of the way here. So they're going to have to win their final 2 regular season games, and then you'd have to win the Big 12 tournament, and then probably hope that somebody else has another loss or slip up in there. So it's not totally out of the question. It's not insane to suggest. But in all likelihood, I think K-State probably ends up I think they probably end up as a 2 seed, the way things are shifting. A lot of the bracketologists out there are suggesting K-State on the 2 line. And as long as they take care of business this week, I imagine we see them there. You just gotta avoid losing at home to Oklahoma. It would really sting if you had to reopen that wound and you end up getting swept by Oklahoma this year. I mean, it would be wild if the only team that swept you in Big 12 play ends up being Oklahoma. So K-State needs to get that taken care of on Wednesday. I imagine they will. I think Oklahoma, they got a big win over Iowa State this weekend, but they're just kind of in a stage right now where there are too many games under 500 to feel like they have a tournament chance. So they're just kind of playing for pride. And as long as, a good senior night crowd is there, K-State should be able to get over the hump. The only thing I guess I'd be concerned about is, does Marquise Noel try to do too much in his last game in Bramlage and turn the ball over 15 times? So we'll have to watch out for that and figure out the way that it ends up working out. One other scenario that's left for K-State out there, I mentioned earlier about how they could be the 3, 4, or 5 in Kansas City. There is still a path to K-State winning the Big 12 this year. So let me break down the very unrealistic way that this happens for K-State. The Wildcats need Texas to lose this week to TCU and then to beat Kansas on Saturday in Austin. Those both seem semi-reasonable to think they could happen. The one other thing that you need to happen, though, is Texas Tech has to win in Allen Fieldhouse. K-State has to go 2-0 this week. I doubt that's going to happen, but figured I would at least throw that out there and how everything ends up working out. A couple of other things before we dive into some topics not associated with the game real quick, because I don't know that we have a ton of crazy thoughts on Oklahoma right now, but because of the way the week ends up working out, we'll talk about Oklahoma here and preview that game a little bit before it gets going. Do you have any thoughts on the Sooners now that they've gone on the road and they've beaten Iowa State? And then also they had the close one against Texas last week, and they're playing good basketball. They have the win over Alabama that stands out this year. Do you think Oklahoma is able to come in and take care of K-State in Manhattan?
I mean, Oklahoma is certainly a frisky team if you want to look at it. Like, they've shown that they can beat quality opponents this year. I mean, you talked about the win over Alabama, 93-69, in the Big 12 SEC tournament, Big 12 SEC challenge, not tournament, excuse me. And then they also beat Kansas State 79-65 in Norman. And then obviously getting a win at Iowa State in Hilton is something that not a lot of people have done. And they're able to win that one by 11 points as well. So they're certainly a team that if Grant Sherfield plays well, if Jalen Hill plays well, if Tanner Groves plays well, they're a team that you don't really want to mess around with. I think Kansas State learned that well firsthand down in Norman 2 weeks ago. So it's a game that I do expect Kansas State to win. It's senior night. I imagine that they'll be pretty ready to go. There's certainly a certain number of kids on this team who I think have a pretty deep emotional connection to Kansas State and would like to go out with a win. But senior night's also one of those situations where there's a lot of emotions and you can't get swept away by it. And you can't get overwhelmed and lose focus of the main priority, the main task at hand. And that's obviously to get a win on your last opportunity inside your home gym. And Kansas State's going to have to fight that. They're going to have to fight Marquise Noel's last game being a Kansas State and inside Bramlage. Like, there's going to be emotions there. I mean, I have to imagine that Keontae Johnson's going to be feeling a lot of emotions heading into Wednesday's game, considering not a lot of people were going to give him a chance to play basketball again this season for a couple of different reasons. Obviously, the heart condition, and then there's other circumstances there as well that we don't really need to dive into. But, you put all these things into the discussion, and Kansas State's going to have to fight a lot of different things. And it's an opportunity for you to get a win, and it's certainly a team that Kansas State should beat, and it's a revenge opportunity. And I think that's something that Jerome Tang will really try and hammer home within the locker room and within the team the next couple of days.
The game at Oklahoma now has moved up to a quad 1 game. It was on the edge. Oklahoma jumped up 11 spots after their win over Iowa State. So they're now inside the top 75 of the net. They're at 65. So K-State is now in a position, as long as they take care of Oklahoma, their only quad 2 or worse loss this year is going to end up being the loss at Butler. And Oklahoma, just to kind of highlight where they are, and that's the reason I was looking at this, was Oklahoma, they took care of business in their quad 3 and 4 games. They went 6-0. But Oklahoma this season is going to have played 23 games against quad 1 and quad 2 opponents. And that includes what will end up being 25 games against quad 1 and 2 opponents. And 18 of those are going to end up being against quad 1 opponents. Right now, they're 5-11 against quad 1 and 3-4 against quad 2. So this is a team that has played a heck of a schedule. They're sitting at 14-15 right now. They obviously think that they can still put something together and try and, probably work their way to be ready for the Big 12 tournament. I just don't know that they're going to have enough to win in Manhattan. The way I think that they were able to win in Hilton is kind of what you said earlier. Iowa State's just a much different team right now than what they were for the first month and a half of the season. They've kind of regressed. I think that teams have been able to see them for what they are a little bit more, where there's some talent on that team, but they did need guys like, it seemed like Gabe Kalsher hit every big shot he needed to against K-State. They just had certain dudes rise up above and beyond what I think that their average level of talent is. And right now, guys just aren't overachieving. They've run into some injury struggles. They're not like a great offensive team, particularly. They have a couple of guys that can shoot it, but they're just not great in general. So I think that has more to do with it, as opposed to Oklahoma, finding some way to get going. And not to mention, they had a really impressive showing from Jacob Groves in that game. Groves ends up going off for 16 points for Oklahoma, and he was also 4 of 5 from 3 in the game. So he was really good for the Sooners, and actually ends up being the high point man of that game that finished 61-50. So K-State, I mean, we know how Oklahoma can beat them, and it's that they get open looks and they knock them down from 3. Oklahoma shot 44% from 3 against Iowa State over the weekend. That was the difference. Iowa State was 27%. So K-State's just got to be better about defending the 3-point line. They've done that in the last 3 games pretty well against both Iowa State, Baylor, and Oklahoma State. I know Baylor was close to 40%, but in the second half, it was a little bit worse than that. And K-State gave a lot of contested looks. Baylor's just a great shooting team, so I think they made it tougher on them than what others would have. So we'll see how it goes. I don't expect anything to be a giant curveball for K-State. They should be motivated for all the reasons we've talked about. So I really don't have any insane thoughts about what's going to take place on Saturday or on Wednesday with Oklahoma. Saturday is the one where it's going to be fascinating to see where West Virginia is sitting and what it feels like the Mountaineers need moving forward, because that loss to Kansas is a killer to them. They're 5-11 in the Big 12 right now. They're 16-13. If they lose to Iowa State tonight in Ames, and then they would lose to K-State, they're 16-15. They would certainly need a couple wins in Kansas City. It all just starts to seem unlikely, and it seems like West Virginia is hanging on to their tournament life by the skin of their teeth, and I don't know that they're going to be able to hang on. So that's the one that really concerns me this week for K-State, is you're going on the road to face West Virginia, a team that's going to be really hungry. And not to mention, K-State hasn't had to play a Wednesday Big 12 game at all this season. They've played on Tuesdays every single week. this time they're facing a team that got to play on Monday. So West Virginia is going to have 2 extra days of rest on K-State. And in addition to that, K-State's making the toughest road trip in the conference. So those are a lot of things that concern me about West Virginia this weekend. We'll discuss that later in the week. We'll reconvene on Thursday and break down everything. But those are my thoughts for the Oklahoma game. K-State should win. I would be surprised if they didn't win that game on Wednesday night now.
Yeah, and to go a little bit deeper on West Virginia and their tournament hopes, you said this a little bit earlier about Kansas State and maybe their hopes of getting a 1 seed and how maybe they would need to win the Big 12 tournament or at least make it to the championship game of the Big 12 tournament. And maybe even then you might still need a little bit of help from other teams losing. I've started to absorb more bracketology content and listen to more podcasts about it in the last couple of weeks as we've gotten closer and closer to the NCAA tournament and Selection Sunday. I've started to gather that in recent years, the committee has put less and less stock on what teams accomplish in their conference tournaments for whatever reason. I think last year is a really good example of that. Notre Dame is a team that got into the NCAA tournament that lost, I believe, on the first day of the ACC tournament. And they were a team that not a lot of people expected to get into the big dance. Obviously, we all know what happened to Texas A&M last year. They surge and make it to the SEC title game, and they get left out. And a lot of people projected them to get into the field. And their opponent in that game, Tennessee, just ran roughshod through the SEC tournament last year, and they didn't really see a boost in their seeding either. So I think that, and even in a Big Ten sense, Indiana, they weren't really in until they beat Illinois. A lot of people felt like the win against Michigan probably got them in, but it clearly didn't because Indiana was one of the last 4 teams in. They had to go play in Dayton last year after beating Michigan and Illinois in the Big Ten tournament. So all those things considered, I don't know how much stock the committee is really putting into the success that you have in your conference tournament. Now, is that because a bracket is basically already done come Sunday? Maybe. I don't know. Is it because they're too lazy to do a couple different brackets? I don't know. But certainly you don't want to leave your fate up to what can happen in your conference tournament because you, one, don't know who you're going to play next at that point. Certainly, and I don't know what the Big 12 bracket would look like right now. And the Big 12 is in a good spot where whoever you play is probably going to be a pretty good opponent. It's going to be a quad 1 opponent in most situations. So that helps you if you win, and it really doesn't hurt you too much if you lose. But you certainly don't want to leave too much up to your conference tournament if you're West Virginia, if you're Texas Tech, who we've discussed a lot here in recent episodes of the podcast. So all things considered, I think West Virginia needs to have a really good last week here if they're going to make it to the NCAA tournament. And that might include having to go 2-0 against Iowa State in Ames, and then obviously beating Kansas State on the last Saturday of the regular season.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think I agree that we've seen that the committee in recent years has put less of an emphasis on what goes down in the conference tournament. I think probably because it's such a volatile thing to try and make sense of, because some of the better teams that show up to them, like how much stock are they putting into it? If we'll use K-State for example. Say there's 10 minutes left in a game. K-State's down 7 against Texas Tech. So they're playing Texas Tech somehow in the Big 12 tournament. And, does K-State ease up at some point or earlier in the game, a team like that ease up and say, hey, we don't really need this right now. We don't need to overexert our guys. We don't need to do this or that and put ourselves in harm's way or tire our guys out. Like it sucks to lose. It would be fun to win, but like, let's ease up a little bit. I think there's some of that to it. I just also think like the randomness of teams having to play that many games in a row and depending on who you're playing can play a role in it. I do think, however, if you look around at the quality of teams that are going to show up there to the Big 12, that's one thing that they have going for them over some of the others. Like, for example, A&M showed up last year. Their first win of the SEC tournament was against Florida. That's not a significant win. So, I mean, that's essentially like a no win, no loss type situation. They did get wins over Auburn and Arkansas, though, which are significant. Both were tournament teams. were pretty solid teams and respected. They still don't get in, though, because they don't get the victory over Tennessee. Did they have a case? Maybe so. The other thing, though, that Texas A&M team had that the teams in the Big 12 aren't going to have to worry about is A&M also had losses last year to in conference play to the KenPom 99th ranked team and the KenPom 137th ranked team with South Carolina and Missouri. And their own, let's see, they didn't have a single top 15 KenPom win in conference play last year. Their best win was Arkansas. Outside of that, they beat 219, 108, 137, 59, 219, 108, 28, and 49. So that's the one difference that I think these teams are going to have in the Big 12 to where the conference tournament might help them in some ways is that there's a whole other body of work that suggests they can do some of these things. Although for a team like West Virginia, if you look at them and they're sitting at like 6-12 in the Big 12, you are going to take a pretty significant stare and go, really? This team only won 6 conference games and we're going to put them in? Like, I think West Virginia is good enough to be in. I think West Virginia is better than teams out of like the ACC that are going to get, however many bids, certain teams there. But if West Virginia struggles and flops, I'm not going to be able to argue too hard that they deserve to be in over some other teams. And for K-State, like, I think that if a team of their stature is able to rip off, it would be 8 straight wins to finish it off. You go through the conference tournament where they would have to be likely Texas and Kansas en route to winning that thing. They would probably give a team like that the 1 seed. The same would be said for Texas. I think if Texas finishes strong and they end up winning the Big 12 tournament, they're in contention for a 1 seed. But it is an out there scenario because you're going to need help where, I don't know, Alabama's probably going to have to take some losses or something or whatever else it may end up being. But those are just some things to consider and throw out there.
Certainly, and I think it's something that we're obviously going to see play out here over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks of the season as conference tournaments start this week in the mid-major and low-major level. And then obviously next week we see the high majors start their conference tournaments. So we'll see it all kind of play out. And it's certainly fascinating because there's certainly teams that are, following right now. And Purdue is one of those teams. They lost Saturday in Indiana. They've struggled here of late. They don't really have a ton of impressive wins over the top tier teams in the Big Ten. I'd have to look up their schedule and kind of count that up, which I don't feel like we need to do right now since this isn't a Big Ten podcast. But there's other teams that are rising. I mean, UCLA is someone who continues to win. They're undefeated in the month of February. So that's certainly something that the Bruins could rise up to a 1 seed. Texas is obviously a team that is well respected. Arizona is kind of starting to struggle. The way they lost, I don't really feel like you should be penalized too much for the losing on a 55-footer or whatever it was. Even though,
but I don't know.
But you lost at home to a team.
You should probably get dinged for losing at home to a bubble team.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah,
and you don't get credit. Like they would not have been given extra credit for a win in that situation.
Yes.
It was just that was one of those where like it's a no-win situation for Arizona playing Arizona State on Saturday. Arizona State has everything to play for in that game. For Arizona, only bad things can happen there. But they're pretty safe where they're sitting. So yeah, I don't think that they should get hurt like extra or whatever. But they lost to a team they should have beaten at home. You have to get dinged for that. And that's the one thing that a team like K-State and Kansas is going to have as well is they're going unless K-State loses to Oklahoma and KU loses to Texas Tech this week, but they're going to be able to say, look, we didn't lose any game at home that we shouldn't have. You say you should protect home floor. K-State's only home loss is probably going to end up being to Texas. KU's is going to end up being to TCU. I don't know. That's the one thing the Big 12 has going for them. And I'm looking here at like West Virginia and how things worked out, just trying to compare them to some of the bubble teams last year. I don't know. When you stack them all up, it just gets really tough to look at a team like that. And if West Virginia ends up with 2 losses this week, then either way, you probably say
at some point your overall record and your conference record does need to matter. You know what I mean? Like it's not something that the committee or bracketologists talk about mattering too much, but at some point it does start to matter. If you only have 6 wins, 5 wins in your league, I don't care how good your league is, you're just not good enough to get into the NCAA tournament. And that's not to be disrespectful to the Big 12 because it's certainly the best league in the country. And that's not something that's really arguable at this point. But at some point, if you only have 5, 6 wins in your league, you don't deserve to get into the NCAA tournament. I don't think very many people would stand up on a mountaintop and yell that if West Virginia finishes with only 5 wins or 6 wins in the Big 12, that they really deserve to get in at the end of the regular season before the conference tournament.
Yeah, and if I mean, it's a tough sell if you've only won 6 regular season games since the start of the new year, which is the case for West Virginia. So there's a lot going against them. That's why they need a win. I think they win tonight in Ames. I think West Virginia does beat Iowa State tonight. Just because I think those two teams are kind of in different spots. West Virginia has a lot of momentum from what they did against Kansas, and they feel like they need it. Iowa State on the other end seems to be going down and in a different direction. So it'll be fascinating to watch to see how that all ends up playing out. So the final week of games for the Big 12 in the midweek that everybody needs to be aware of. 2 games tonight. Baylor at Oklahoma State at 8 o'clock and West Virginia at Iowa State at 8 o'clock as well. That'll be ESPN2. I kind of think both teams that need the win tonight get the win. I think Oklahoma State and West Virginia win this evening. Oklahoma State's like a 1.5-point dog right now to Baylor, and Keontae George, I don't believe, is playing tonight for the Bears. He got hurt in their win against Texas on Saturday. So I think Oklahoma State gets the job done tonight, and same for West Virginia. Tomorrow night, 1 game, just Texas Tech at KU, and then Wednesday, an hour after K-State and Oklahoma get started at 7, Texas and TCU will play in Fort Worth. So that's the final midweek games. And Saturday, there will be a full slate. We'll talk about those a little bit later on. A couple of other things I wanted to get into real quick before Alec and I get out of here and again on this Monday. Be sure to check out Emo Online later this afternoon and evening. K-State basketball to have a media availability today ahead of the Senior Day festivities and everything else that's going to go on there. We talked about this yesterday, you, me, and Gabe, because you guys, as non-K-Staters, I think we're wanting to call out a K-State bias on the suggestion that Marquise Noel should be in the Big 12 Player of the Year conversation, that there could be a debate to be had about what is going on there between him and Jalen Wilson. I don't want to put words in your mouth. So am I correct in thinking that your thought process is that it's a little insane to think Marquise Noel has a legitimate case for the award?
I don't think it's insane to think he has a case. I just don't think he's going to win. And I don't think he's going to get very many votes. Like Jalen Wilson's going to win Jalen Wilson's going to win it. And I understand that there's a lot of K-State fans.
I do think he is going to win it because I think just body of work and everything else, like it doesn't feel like Jalen Wilson had much of a slip off, similar to what Noel had. But yeah, I'll let you go on.
I think that both Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson have been great for Kansas State this year, but I don't think either one of them is, quite frankly, as good as Jalen Wilson, and I don't think either one of them is maybe as important to their team as Jalen Wilson is.
Because I would disagree with that.
I think
you think if you took Marquise or Keontae away from this team, they would do the same stuff?
No, but I don't think if you took Jalen Wilson off Kansas that they would do the same stuff. Because
I don't think they would be hampered as much as you think, though.
As people think it is.
They have 4 dudes that are average. So Jalen Wilson is there. They have 3 other guys in addition to Jalen Wilson that are averaging double figures in Big 12 play. And Grady Dick is pretty good. I think we've seen at times that things have worked out in their favor.
I think that Grady Dick benefits greatly from not having to dribble ever on offense. I mean, he stands in a spot and is a spot-up shooter for them, essentially. And I don't think very highly of Grady Dick's defensive capabilities either, personally. And I don't really think Kevin McCullough does a whole lot of handling for them. And obviously, KJ Adams isn't somebody who, is driving a ton of production. I think a lot of those players are able to produce numbers offensively because of the gravitational pull that Jalen Wilson has, for other teams on a scouting report. Does Keontae Johnson not have a large gravitational pull? No. Does Marquise Noel not have a large gravitational pull? No. They both are very, very important. And if you go look at the most recent 5 film favorites, there's a certain clip that literally shows how much emphasis teams are putting towards Marquise Noel and his ability to create off the dribble. But at the same time, I think that Jalen Wilson is as important to this Kansas team as Keontae Johnson or Marquise Noel might be to their individual team as well. And yeah, the overall supporting cast at KU is certainly better than it is at K-State. But I also think that Jalen Wilson elevates his teammates a lot. And I don't think that he gets a credit that he necessarily deserves for that. And at the same time, this makes me sound like I love Jalen Wilson as a player.
It does.
I don't really think I do love Jalen Wilson as a player. I think he struggles with efficiency a lot. I think that he takes a ton of shots that are high percentage looks. And I've said this in the past. I think Jalen Wilson is the best player that KU has had in a long time. I mean, we got into this conversation, the three of us did last week or 2 weeks ago after the show, and I don't think that Jalen Wilson was one of the 5 most important players on Kansas's national championship team last year. Maybe he's 5th. But I think that Jalen Wilson's overall appreciation from the national perspective is higher than my individual appreciation for what Jalen Wilson contributes to KU, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If I had a National Player of the Year vote, which I do not, Jalen Wilson would not be number 1 or number 2 on my ballot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think
he might not even be number 3, to be honest.
I've thought all season that, I mean, here's the difference. I think the style that Jalen Wilson plays and the fact that he feels like and is, kind of the guy on this team has led to a guy like Grady Dick, in your eyes, being more of just like a catch and shoot guy for him. I think Grady Dick could be much more than that. And depending on which Kansas team he would have been flopped into, we probably would have seen more of that. But because Jalen Wilson has been such a ball-dominant guy this year and has done so many other things and has just kind of taken the reins and said, hey, let's go. I'm gonna try and carry you guys. I think that's hurt seeing what he can do to help out in those situations. And kind of thinking about, like, I mean, the stretches that he went on, like everybody knows about the stretch where he totaled like 90 some points over 3 games, and KU went 0-3, even though he was unstoppable. He was great in Manhattan. He was great against Baylor. There was another game tossed in there, and maybe it was the TCU game, and KU just couldn't do anything else as a team. But since that has happened over the last 8 games, KU 7-1. And he's shooting under 38% from the floor, and he's 31% from 3. So the less that Wilson has had to do for KU, they have played better as of late. And it's not like the competition level has dropped off in any way over the last 8 games. I mean, they have the win against Texas. They have the win against Baylor. There's a lot of things in there that Kansas has done, and it's been other guys help leading the way. So when I initially started thinking about this, like, I would say Jalen Wilson should probably be the player of the year. I expect him to get it just because he's the best player on the best team in the league. And I don't think that his struggles have been as publicized as Marquise Noel's, but it also helps that the fact that over the last 8 games when Wilson has struggled more, KU hasn't been losing because they do have more talent around him. The case for Marquise Noel is that he's averaging almost 20 points a game in Big 12 play, and he's got a better offensive efficiency number than what Jalen Wilson does. Marquise Noel probably going to be on the All Big 12 defensive team again this year like he was last season. And obviously he dishes out the assists at a high level. There are a lot of things that go on there for Noel. He leads the league in assists. He leads the league in steals. He does a lot for K-State. Now, the knock is the turnovers, and what goes into that is, okay, yes, that's true. Marquise Noel, though, he is the point guard. He has the ball in his hands a lot more. He's averaging over 3.5, 3.6 turnovers per game.
In Big 12 play.
Okay, yeah, there you go. So overall in the season, 3.6. It's 4.2 in Big 12 play. He's averaging, though, still, 3 assists more than turnovers in Big 12 play. And in addition to that, like Jalen Wilson isn't pristine by any stretch of the imagination when it comes to turnovers. Because I know when my guy Cole Manbeck tweeted this out yesterday, it got some KU fans very hot and bothered. Jalen Wilson, he's giving the ball away 2.6 times in Big 12 play. I get it. Noel's a turnover and a half more, but Noel also is averaging 5 more assists a game than Wilson, and is having to handle the ball much, much more. And there's more stress on Noel when he's handling the ball as opposed to Wilson, because Wilson, even if they're just catch and shoot guys, he does have other guys that can step up. All season long, it's been Marquise Noel or Keontae Johnson. Those are the only 2 dudes that K-State has to turn to. And at the end of the day, like, my argument is this: Noel, when he's led K-State in scoring in Big 12 play, he's done it 11 of 16 times now. K-State's 8-3. When Jalen Wilson is KU's leading scorer in Big 12 play, it's been done 7 times in 16 games. KU is 4-3. And the argument, I know it can be this, and I wrote about it this morning in the Monday Thoughts piece, but the thought can be, hey, but I mean, KU has more depth. Jalen Wilson has better players around him than what K-State does for Noel. So, of course, there are going to be fewer games for Jalen Wilson to be the leading scorer and all this and that. That kind of amplifies the point that I'm trying to make in all this, is that Marquise Noel, with less depth and less help, has come through and has taken a team that was picked to finish dead last in the league, and everybody in the league thought K-State was going to finish in last place, and has elevated them to the point where they are going to be the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th best team in this league this year. And he's done it without a lot of help from anywhere else outside of Keontae Johnson. He's had to carry this burden. He's done a lot of good things. I think at the end of the day, if coaches put like serious thought into it, I think Marquise Noel and Jalen Wilson would be a much closer race for a Big 12 Player of the Year than what the initial thought would be by a lot of people. And at the end of the day, like, I went into this thinking, okay, I'd probably still give it to Jalen Wilson. But I got to the end where I talked myself into, I really do think Marquise Noel deserves to be the Big 12 Player of the Year for everything that he's done and how much has been on his plate and how he's been able to deliver this year. Like, yes, there's a stretch where those games were really, really ugly to watch, but most of the games have been really good to watch for Marquise Noel, and he's done it with a lot of pressure and expectations for a team that didn't have a ton of other help around him. Keontae Johnson's the only dude averaging in double figures in Big 12 play for K-State. So he's needed to do most of it, and he stepped up to the plate and done that. So I actually think that there should be a legitimate case, and anybody that just kind of laughs off the notion or thinks that it's a K-State bias thing to suggest that Noel should win this award, it's absolutely not. This is a guy that is well deserving of it. He's probably not going to win it for the reasons that I said. But we'll just see how that ends up working out next week when the all Big 12 team gets released and how that works out for him. But he's very deserving. He'll be on first team. Keontae Johnson will probably be there as well, and that'll be a good showing for K-State.
Yeah, I mean, certainly those are all good points. And I don't want to make it seem like it's K-State bias or whatever phrase has been used, but Jalen Wilson's going to win the award. And at the same time, and this kind of can be used also in the discussion of the NCAA tournament and who gets a bid. Like, I think a lot of times people let preseason notions and preseason thoughts invade what their regular season and end of regular season thoughts are. And I would compare it to North Carolina. Like, North Carolina is a team that a lot of people are now buying because they smoked Virginia on Saturday. Or they're a team that people have now put into the tournament because they beat Virginia on Saturday. North Carolina is not an NCAA tournament team because of one win. Like, that was their first quad one win, and I don't really think Virginia is that good. Okay? So, and Virginia is a team that's kind of started to fall in certain people's eyes when you look at the bracket matrix stuff and where people kind of have them slotted and everything else. So UNC still has work to do. And I think that each of the two players on Kansas State and Jalen Wilson at KU have an opportunity to kind of put a nail in their argument to win the Big 12 Player of the Year. I still think it's going to be Jalen Wilson, and maybe he's a beneficiary of being the preseason Big 12 Player of the Year and all that kind of comes with that. And there's a lot of people who have votes, and there's a lot of people who have opinions who maybe don't put the type of thought into it or don't look at all of the numbers and statistical analysis that is maybe always necessary to it. But that's just kind of how the world turns. And is it right or is it wrong? I don't feel like getting into that discussion, but Jalen Wilson's deserving of it. I think you can make a case that both of the two best players on Kansas State are deserving of it. I think you can make a case that Baylor has players that are deserving of it. And the same for Texas and everyone else. But at this point, like, I do think Jalen Wilson's going to win the Big 12 Player of the Year. I would expect him to be an All-American at the end of the season. And we'll see if Marquise Noel is in that same kind of conversation come national award season in college basketball.
Yeah, I think not just people on the outside, but also like some K-State fans, probably that the little stretch where K-State wasn't playing very well and the only wins came against Florida and TCU, probably sit there and think to yourself, you're surprised by this and everything. But when you step aside and you kind of look at the full scope, everything still points to a lot of success. So I'm not overly passionate about it one way or the other, but I do think that it's much more of a conversation and a discussion that should be thought of as opposed to just kind of writing it off and be like, nah, it's Jalen Wilson's award to win. So wanted to throw that in there. One final thing. This happened after we got done on Friday. The rumor from Brett McMurphy in his report was that the Pac-12 was in talks with Ion TV and that they might be a media partner for the Pac-12. Then later on, Pac-12 Stuart Mandel, the Athletic, came out and disputed that and said that that wasn't true. So who knows? I have a tough time believing that Brett McMurphy just woke up on Friday and was like, okay, what random cable TV station can I pick to say the Pac-12 is going to have games on, or whoever reached out to him about that. My guess is the name Ion TV got thrown out in some way. It makes sense because Scripps, who owns them, is trying to do a little bit more in the sports space. They've launched their Scripps sports division and everything. So my guess is it has been floated out there. It's probably not as serious as McMurphy made it seem. But that blew Realignment and Conference Wars Twitter up for a while on Friday. And I know that you feel much differently about all this than me, Alex. So I'll let you have your first cracks at the Pac-12 Ion TV.
I'm opting out of all discussion between the two conferences and their TV deals. I'm over it. I'm completely over it. We talked about it for like an hour after the show on Friday, and where I feel. I don't think more people need to hear my thoughts on it because it's annoying at this point. I think it's a whole bunch of stuff.
Did you read what I had to say about the Pac-12 today?
I have not. I have it on my reading list for this evening.
I know you're probably not going to like it.
I might just read over that because I'm real tired of reading about the Pac-12's media rights because I think
let me just read to you. Let me just read it to you right now so I can on the podcast get my thoughts out there, and then you can react to what I had to say. So I was sitting around this weekend and thinking about it. Live Golf played their first tournament of the 2023 season down in Mayakoba, and they got a TV deal of some kind, whether they're paying the CW or whatever. They are on the CW, but they're only on it 2 of their 3 rounds because the first round is always just on streaming on their app. It's not shown live. Then days 2 and 3 are shown live and everything else. And the CW is not one of those areas that you turn to and think of sports ever. So it started to make me think that there are some similarities here between Live Golf and the Pac-12. So let me read to you what I said here in this piece. And if you haven't read the Monday Thoughts, go in there because it's not just me blasting the Live and Pac-12 at the end. There's other good stuff in there talking about some of the Big 12 regular season things ending. Notes early on about K-State spring football stuff going on with spring practice getting ready to start in the next week. And then also some nuggets on young guys around the program. But I wrote this. I said, last week, Brett McMurphy of the Action Network reported that the Pac-12 had a new media partner in discussion for broadcast rights, Ion Television. Ion is most known for the reruns of a lot of crime shows, such as one of my favorites, Psych, and others like all 1,000 NCIS spinoffs, Criminal Minds, Flashpoint, whatever the heck that is, and many others. The report was later disputed by Stuart Mandel. Either way, this is a signal of where the Pac-12 media negotiations currently sit. Things are so bad that there is chatter from somewhere that a non-sports and non-live programming channel is in the mix to show Pac-12 games. It's similar to that of Live Golf, who finally found a linear TV home in the United States with the CW. Again, a channel with no live programming or sports, just the creators of One Tree Hill, hashtag Team Grandpa Dan, those who know, and if you don't know, ask your wife, and a bunch of other crappy shows that my wife and women in their 20s to 40s love. Over the weekend, Live had their first tournament air on the CW, and Saturday's coverage brought home an overnight rating of 0.2. It's not very good. In fact, it's horrendous. Possible bad TV marriages aren't the only thing that the two leagues have in common. They both have woefully incompetent leadership. For Live, it happens to be the arrogant and overrated Greg Norman, who is a loudmouth that is sour that his actual playing career wasn't good enough to be mentioned in the top tier of golf history. For the Pac-12, it happens to be the arrogant and truth-stretching, outright lying loudmouth George Klyavkov. Neither have products that will be worth mass audiences in the future, and it doesn't help that the faces and mouthpieces for each league are only going to make things worse rather than better. One other comparison, while Liv may have one golfer that I will still miss on the PGA Tour and might check in on with Cam Smith, everyone else is a worthless, aged-out has-been or never was. Cam Smith himself isn't enough for me to care to watch the Liv or seek it out on a regular basis. The same will go for the Pac-12 once USC and UCLA take off for the Big Ten in 2024. Oregon is the Cam Smith of the Pac-12. We're the check-in every once in a while, but not enough for me to watch the product as a whole to see what the have-beens and never was of Stanford, Oregon State, Washington State, Arizona, Cal, and others are up to. And if all that sounds harsh, I don't care. Both Norman and Klyavkov deserve every ounce that comes their way as their brash and in-your-face approach started these battles. They can't cry victim when the PGA Tour or Big 12 finishes the war as winners. I know how you feel about this. You hate the war going on between the Pac-12 and Big 12. What's your takeaway there on me going after him, since I'm contributing to the problem that you don't like?
I'm going to bite my tongue and not say something that's going to upset a lot of people. Is the avenue?
Say it. That's what you're here for.
No, I'm not doing it because I'm not going to upset a lot of people today. I've got other things that I need to deal with. I don't need my Twitter mentions firing off. I don't need YouTube comments firing off, replies to everything firing off. I've got other stuff that is higher on my to-do list today than dealing with social media fodder.
It's the coward's way out. You got it. I mean,
I'm over it. I'm over all of it. Maybe I'll say it off the air.
Nope. See, if you're not going to say it on the air, I don't want to hear it off the air.
That's fine.
You don't need second word down. We're just leaving here. I'm not even going to address it with you. Okay. All right. Well, no thoughts from Alec on it. I saved the day, though. My last part of Monday Thoughts was I listed big games to watch outside of the Big 12 in the final week of the regular season. I did start by saying that it was kind of a joke because there's not much outside of the Big 12 that's worth watching this week if you're watching college basketball. But everybody should watch future Big 12 team, Houston, number one team in the land, kick Wichita State's ass later this week. That's important to watch for a couple of reasons. One, whatever, support Houston, number one team in the country coming to the Big 12. And also a round of applause to slapping the behinds of Wichita State and just, giving them more embarrassment to an already embarrassing season. But then I wanted to make sure that everybody was on board and ready to support the Illini and Sun Devils as they have a big week of basketball ahead of them. So I told people that they need to watch Illinois face Michigan and Purdue this week.
Don't
they need
subject yourself
and
to
that they need to be locked in on Thursday when Gabe's Sun Devils get off the bubble once and for all with a win at UCLA. So
don't subject yourself to watching Illinois this week. That is,
yeah.
If you want some life advice from Alec, don't watch Illinois for the rest of the season. They're not worth watching. I'll take my 2 league titles and
I'll
1 seed.
I'll take the future national championship coming K-State's way.
I'll bet you $100 million that K-State doesn't win a national championship this year.
Okay, not this year. I'm not telling you it's coming this year. I mean, it took them like a half century to do it at Baylor, but they eventually did it.
Not a half century. That's a long
that was hyperbole. That was a joke. It only took them like 20. And just think, if you're trying to do it without a murder happening at your school and on your basketball program, it's probably a lot easier to do it in Manhattan than it was in Waco. But we'll see. So those are a couple of things. Go check out the entire Monday Thoughts piece, and then also later today, highlights from K-State's media availability ahead of the final week of the regular season. Also, you can find Alec's notebook from basketball over the weekend, as well as 5 film favorites, player grades, little fast break action, and everything else that you need. And if you're not signed up for Emo Online, it's probably the best time to do it. Cats are about to be dancing, and there's going to be a lot of different content coming your way next week when we're in Kansas City, and then however deep into the NCAA tournament K-State goes. And also, starting on March 1st, K-State's going to have a visitor March 1st, and it's going to go all the way through spring practice, where they're going to have guys in and out checking out the program. So recruiting's about to heat up too. So go do it. Now is the time to get signed up at Emo Online and follow along with everything that myself, Alec, and Gabe have to say about the Wildcats. And then we'll have coverage Wednesday evening from Bramlage when K-State has their senior night. And then we'll be back on Thursday with a podcast. And we'll just do 2 this week because basketball makes things a little weird with the Monday, Wednesday, Friday situation we used to do. If I'm generous, I'll do something Friday. We'll see. We'll see what comes our way and everything else that comes out of it. Any final thoughts from today, Alec, or are you ready to prep yourself to hear what the basketball team has to say this afternoon?
I'm ready to talk to some seniors about their last game at Bramlage.
Who do you think has the most over the top like send off on Wednesday? I mean, obviously, like crowd wise, Marquise Noel is going to get the loudest ovation because he's stood out for so long and everything. But who's going to have like the most showmanship when it's all said and done? Probably Marquise as well. I mean, I'm expecting a kiss of the power cat from Marquise Noel.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. And to avoid the social media discourse that we're all aware of, I think that's another reason why Marquise Noel will probably go over the top.
You should ask him you should ask each senior today if there are any plans on power cat kisses.
No.
You know what's funny is it wouldn't surprise me. We've had these conversations in K-State circles for years now about Pullen and Beasley and who else should be up in the rafters. It wouldn't surprise me if there's some people out there that are that would want to gatekeep the kissing of the power cat, since the Pullen did it, Dean Wade did it, Barry Brown did it. Like, if they're like, well, I don't know, Keontae was only here for 7 months, so I'm not sure he really gets to kiss the power cat or something. I don't know. Just a thought that hit me right there. So we'll see. I always enjoy senior day. I like any event where there's over the top pomp and circumstance. That's why I love opening day so much. It's why I like senior day. Whatever it is. I mean, I don't like sitting through senior day because it's long, but I do like some of the videos and other stuff that goes on with it. So, all right, well, that'll do it for us. We'll get out of here. A little over an hour for everybody to listen to Kill a Monday. And a reminder, we talked a little bit about the Oklahoma game in there, but I can't say much about Oklahoma right now. They don't fascinate me in any way whatsoever. So we'll see how it ends up working out for the Wildcats and everything else. Kim Pom projects K-State to win the game by 6. If K-State doesn't win the game by 6, I'll be severely disappointed. I think they're playing better than that right now. So we are out of here. Follow us on Twitter at @TheRealMasonV, @Alec_Bussy, and go get signed up for Emo Online. And if you're not going to sign up, at least do us a solid. If you're watching or listening to this, subscribe to the YouTube channel and also to the podcast feed to make sure that you're always up to date when new videos and podcasts get uploaded. So we're out of here.